Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, here to talk about an upcoming fight at super middleweight that you need to know about between Jesse Brinkley, formerly of the Contender, right? And he's going up against New York's Kid Chocolate, unbeaten Peter Quillin. Now, before I go further, just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. The opinion you should follow should be your own. The odds are Peter Quillin minus 280, and he's fighting Jesse Brinkley, who is a plus 240 underdog. This fight is taking place this weekend. I like Peter Quillin in this fight, but let me add a few caveats, right? There are different types of counterpunchers. At the most advanced end of the scale, and this is all my opinion, are people like Floyd Mayweather, Roberto Duran. These are guys who could literally counter one punch that you throw at a time. In other words, if you see Mayweather, he has a move. It's called a pull counter, where he lets the other guy throw a punch. He leans his head back so the punch stops right about here. Then he comes in with a pretty vicious right hand, right? In other words, Mayweather is a guy who literally could deconstruct you down to the punch you throw and how he reacts to that one punch, right? In an earlier generation, Roberto Duran could literally smother a guy. He could get up on the guy. Then when the guy threw a punch, let's say a left hand, Duran would be able to, every time the guy threw that left hand, hit the guy before the punch landed or roll with the punch. So the left was blocked by a shoulder, and Duran would be able to hit you with his counter just off that one punch, right? And interestingly enough, the Floyd Mayweathers and the Roberto Durans of the world literally could stand right in front of you, counter you without moving away. Take a look at Mayweather's fight against Shane Mosley. You're going to see that Mayweather doesn't even use movement in that fight. What Mayweather's doing is he's literally right in front of Shane Mosley, systematically countering him and outboxing him the entire match. And keep in mind, Mosley's a guy with hand speed and power. Peter Quillin, unbeaten, he's not there yet, right? Quillin to me is, and I know this is heresy, but whatever. You know, the time to criticize a driver is before the car crash, right? Peter Quillin to me is a younger fighter, less advanced, not quite where those guys are. He's more of a combination counter puncher. In other words, he counters you like Manny Pacquiao countered Antonio Margarito. In other words, they wait for opportunities. They see you, throw a punch. Then they'll jump in with a combination, right? Then they back out. It's a totally different style. This is ambush countering, right? John Pascal, same type thing. Jumps in, throws a combination, then comes back out. The difference is, whereas a Roberto Duran is literally, when he's throwing a counter, it's kind of, you throw this, I throw that. You do this, I do that. With these combination guys, it's basically, okay, you've thrown this, I'm going to come in with a combination, then I'm going to get back out, right? Peter Quillin waits for his man to throw a punch, then he jumps in with a 1-2. In other words, his fight style a little bit different than, let's say, Manny Pacquiao, where I've seen Pacquiao jump in and literally throw, and granted, Pacquiao has blinding hand speed, but I've seen Pacquiao literally throw, 6, 8, 10 punches on a combination, right? Once the other guy has committed to a punch and Pacquiao's dodged it. Take a look at Pacquiao against Oscar De La Hoya. Peter Quillin, on the other hand, it's more of a his opponent throws a punch, he comes in with a 1-2. He has a greater than 70% knockout ratio. And of course, he can take you out with either hand, but the more interesting knockouts are with his left hand, right? He knows how to jump in. He has power. He's an athlete. He can stay outside, away from your jab, right? Most of his defense are his legs. In other words, his opponent throws a jab. The jab will come up short on Quillin. Quillin's just waiting for an opportunity to then leap in, throw a couple of punches, then back out, right? Where Quillin gets interesting is when you're up close on Quillin, he actually can defend himself on the inside. And for a guy with his knockout ratio, again, more than 70%, he actually has some defensive skills. In other words, he knows how to cover up. He keeps his hands high, right? He knows how to defend himself. The holes in Quillin's game, and I'm dissecting Quillin because he is the younger prospect in this fight. Brinkley's in his 30s, Quillin's 27, right? We're talking about super middle where you have huge names out there. Andre Ward, Lucien Bute, Carl Froch, Arthur Abraham, right? These are big names. Glenn Johnson now. These are big games at 168, right? The knock I see on Quillin is he needs room to operate offensively. In other words, while he can defend himself inside, I think he has a hole in his offensive arsenal inside. I believe a fighter like an Andre Ward would be able to get inside, and while he would have to deal with Quillin's defense inside, which is better than Alan Green's defense inside, he wouldn't have to worry about Quillin's offense. In other words, the part of Roberto Duran's game where if you got inside on Duran, he's still roughing you up because he knows how to fight inside. Quillin doesn't have that game at the championship level. He's going to have to address the fact that others have an opportunity to exploit that shortcoming, right? And the other thing I noticed with Quillin, too, is he's been so successful at knocking guys out that he doesn't really use his jab a lot from distance. I believe that is a necessity, again, when you're fighting a Lucien Bute or an Andre Ward. And quite frankly, you're going to have to win some rounds. You cannot afford against those guys to find yourself, giving away rounds because those guys, of course, have, won many quality distance fights. And those guys are hard to hit and hard to beat as it is and very hard to knock out. Andre Ward unbeaten, Lucien Bute unbeaten. The one blemish on Bute's record where he was severely tested by Libredo Andrade came in the last round of their first fight. In other words, just to get to that last round is like climbing Mount Everest, as Jesse Brinkley knows well. Let me talk about Jesse Brinkley briefly. Jesse Brinkley fought Lucien Bute. Jesse Brinkley got knocked out by Lucien Bute in the 9th round. What you're going to notice in that fight is that Brinkley had a problem with Bute's height. The combination of height and distance and power gave Brinkley all kind of problems. Brinkley's 5'10", Bute, like Quillin's, around 6'1". Bute knows how to use length. Bute stayed outside of Brinkley's jab, as I suspect Quillin will. Brinkley started leaning in to hit Bute, and Bute is an excellent counterpuncher. He's an upper-level counterpuncher. Bute, in fact, is such an interesting counterpuncher. Bute can counter you to the body. So Jesse Brinkley started getting hit with some pretty brutal counters, ultimately getting knocked out in the 9th round. I recommend that everyone take a look at that knockdown. Bute, who is left-handed, comes around with the left hand, perfect counter, hits Brinkley in the face, takes him out. I think the same pattern is going to happen in this Quillin fight. I'm not calling a knockout. right? Brinkley certainly is a veteran who knows how to survive. This is only a 10-round fight, but I'm expecting Quillin to be outside of Brinkley's jab, and Brinkley has a pretty good jab. I'm expecting Quillin to be able to avoid Brinkley's right hand, and Brinkley has a pretty good right hand. What's going to doom Brinkley, in my opinion, is that Brinkley doesn't have a mobile center of gravity. In other words, when he goes from point A to point B quickly, his power doesn't go with him. You don't notice it when he's fighting people like Curtis Stevens, who are right in front of him, but against Lucien Bute, it became apparent that when Bute was outside, as Brinkley came forward, if Bute just took a step back, Brinkley really wasn't able to take that step forward with power. Right? Let me point out, too, toward the end of that fight, it's interesting. Brinkley actually starts backing up against Lucien Bute. Right? Brinkley had tasted the power and understood that he just could not fight in close against a taller guy with that kind of hand speed and that kind of power. I believe he's going to find that out against Kid Chocolate, Peter Quillin. I like Quillin at a minus 280. I hope Quillin takes the opportunity, especially since Bute is tied up with a fight against Mikhail Kessler, and several guys at 168, including Andre Ward, are tied up in the Super 6 tournament. If I'm Quillin at 27, I spend the next 2 years trying to learn the things I don't know. In other words, I would be in fights, especially fights I'm dominating, perhaps this fight, because Brinkley can't fight inside, in my opinion. I would, if I have the fight won, I would come inside, like Andre Ward did against Edison Miranda, just to get the experience of coming inside against a world-class fighter before a crowd. Just a little bit different dynamic than doing it in sparring. Let me also point out, too, that even the best of the best, Sergio Martinez, excellent ambush fighter, absolutely stunning as an ambush fighter. But even Martinez, who's a master outside, has been challenging himself and has developed a way to get inside on fighters. Take a look at the Paul Williams rematch. You're going to see the first round of that fight. Sergio Martinez actually comes inside on Paul Williams, right? A whole different dynamic to his normal game, but a dynamic that obviously would help him if he were to fight someone like Andre Ward, right? If I'm Peter Quillin, I would be concentrating on things like that. Also, if I have Brinkley staggered and it looks like I'm going to win the fight, rather than just finish Brinkley, I would literally try to then use the fight like Roy Jones used to when he was younger. I would carry Brinkley for a few rounds and try to dust off a jab, try to fool around with volume from distance, try to do things that are outside of my comfort zone. He's going to have to, if he's going to be dealing with the unbeaten guys of Lucien Bute and Andre Ward, right? He has a great game for what he's done. Now that he's fighting contender level guys, he's going to have to lift that game, now, before he's in the heat of battle against the absolute elites in Ward and Bute. Let me know what you think. I like Quillin here at minus 280. Let me know what you think. Leave your comments for me here on YouTube. And, of course, visit us at gamblersadvisory.com. Thanks for your time.